China Global Television Network.
Live from London, this is The World Today.
Hello, I'm Jamie Owen. Welcome to the program. Our top stories. China's President Xi Jinping and Ukraine's President Zelensky have had their first phone call since the Russia-Ukraine conflict began. Zelensky described it as long and meaningful. Our other headlines, thousands of people are airlifted from Sudan, where an uneasy ceasefire seems to be holding. Texas is banning some foreign nationals, including the Chinese, from owning land, citing national security reasons. And
boy, that's so heartbreaking.
Can't bear to say farewell, a tearful goodbye as Yaya returns to China after decades of living in Memphis. A ceasefire between rival military factions in Sudan appears to be holding despite gunfire and explosions heard on the outskirts of the capital, Khartoum. The first flight carrying British nationals escaping Sudan has just landed in the UK. They are among thousands of people who've been airlifted from the country. Meanwhile, Sudan's Interior Ministry has accused the RSF paramilitary group of breaking into 5 prisons and releasing all the detainees, but the RSF has denied those allegations. Well, let's talk to our correspondent, Patrick Oyet, who's in Juba. Patrick, first of all, what more do we know about these prison breaks? There seems to be conflicting reports as to exactly what has happened.
Yes, it's true that now we have information that almost all the prisons that are in Khartoum do not have inmates now. These inmates are out, they are at large, including, of course, the Kobar prison. Kobar is a very, very famous name in South Sudan in Sudan for wrong reasons, definitely, because many, many people have ever been there, and that's where also former President Omar al-Bashir is. And one person in particular of interest is also his former Minister for Interior, Ahmed Haroun, and he has confirmed that he is also out of prison. This is a man who was accused of a lot of atrocities, war crimes and crimes against humanity. He is out now. Of course, the Rapid Support Forces have been accused of having released people from prison, but the Rapid Support Forces are denying that accusation. They are instead saying it is the Sudan Armed Forces that release the inmates. Sudan Armed Forces say it is not in charge of prisons. It is only the police and the prison warders who are in charge of prison, and the police have come out to say that it was the Rapid Support Forces. But somebody like, for example, Haroun, who has spoken to some media in Khartoum, he has said that it is the Sudan Armed Forces that have released him. But of course, you can never trust this. These are still things that are coming from people who may say things because of their own interests.
Patrick, we're getting conflicting reports about the ceasefire. Is your sense that it is holding, at least for now?
At least to a larger extent, the ceasefire is holding. Markets have opened, shops have opened. People at least are trying to restock, to buy basic needs for their homestead. However, the complaints we are hearing from business people is that they do not have supplies. They are only selling what they have. They are not getting new stock. So even though the shops are open, the markets are open, it will be temporary, because once whatever stock is there is over, people cannot access more stock. Another thing, also, fuel stations are open, but most of them are out of fuel. Prices also have gone very, very high. Yes, so to a larger extent, the ceasefire is holding.
Patrick, thank you for that. Our correspondent Patrick Oyet in Juba. Well, the conflict in Sudan has left many people without clean water and electricity. CGTN's correspondent Momen Al-Maki has been assessing what that means for life in the capital, Khartoum.
For 6 days, I couldn't go out of this door in order to get our necessities of food and water. Now we do not have any access to water or electricity. Our situation is bad. the weather is very hot here in Khartoum. Temperatures now are reaching 38 and maybe 40 degrees. As you see right here, there is no water. We do not have any clean water here in tubes for now for 6 days. We do not have water. And I'm going to show you our stocks of water. These are our water container. It is nearly half of it. It's nearly empty. We do not have that much water. We have another one. I will show it to you right now. This is nearly full. Our water will make us living for maybe 1 to 2 days, but after that we will suffer a lot if we didn't get clean water.
China's President Xi Jinping and his Ukrainian counterpart Volodymyr Zelensky have held their first phone call since the war with Russia began. Zelensky described it as long and meaningful. China announced it would send special representatives to Ukraine and hold talks with all parties aimed at trying to resolve the conflict.
This phone conversation shows the great importance China attaches to growing its relations with Ukraine and China's willingness to maintain the momentum of cooperation in all fields. Second, since the full escalation of the Ukraine crisis, China, as a responsible major country and a permanent member of the UN Security Council, has been committed to promoting peace talks in an objective and impartial manner and has stayed in communication with relevant parties.
Let's talk to our correspondent Shelby Wilder in Kyiv. Shelby, what more do we know about Zelensky's phone call with President Xi?
Well, as you mentioned, Jamie, this was the first phone conversation between Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky and Chinese President Xi Jinping since this conflict began. And President Zelensky today said that it was, quote, long and meaningful. And Zelensky just added, saying that he believes this phone call, along with the appointment of Ukraine's ambassador to China, will help boost bilateral relations with Beijing.
What does this mean for the possibility of the start of any peace talks or peace efforts?
Well, during this phone call today, President Xi confirmed to President Zelensky that China would be sending special representatives to Ukraine to hold talks. We imagine that Chinese representatives will be looking to discuss their 12-point peace plan, which was unveiled on February 24th of this year, which marked the one-year anniversary since this conflict had began. And we really just know that Beijing has repeatedly called for a ceasefire and peace talks between Ukraine and Russia.
Away from the diplomacy, what's the latest on the fighting?
So the latest we've been hearing from Ukrainian intelligence, they have said that they are seeing Russia's military taking up defensive positions along the front lines. That is apart from the besieged city of Bakhmut, which we have been following, along with its surrounding areas. But really what this means, at least what Ukrainian intelligence believes, is that now Russia's military will try to hold on to its occupied territories rather than focusing on making new gains ahead of this highly anticipated spring Ukrainian counteroffensive, Jamie.
Shelby, thank you for that. Our correspondent Shelby Wilder in Kyiv. Well, let's talk now to our correspondent Stuart Smith in Moscow. Stuart, what's your sense of the Kremlin's response? What does this phone call mean from Russia's perspective?
Yeah, well, first of all, the Russian Foreign Ministry spokeswoman Maria Zakharova has commented. She says that the Foreign Ministry notes and appreciates the efforts of China in the search for peace in Ukraine. She used it as another opportunity to express the Kremlin viewpoint that Kyiv is responsible for the lack of progress in negotiations, as well as what she described as Western curators. But in terms of the chance of this particular call changing anything for Russia, no new signs. Indeed, the most often refrain we've heard from the Kremlin over the last few months months is that because of the lack of progress, the Kremlin sees no prerequisites for the peaceful resolution of the conflict in Ukraine, and therefore will continue the so-called special military operation until they're completed militarily. Now, that position could change, but there's been no sign yet that it has.
Meanwhile, the economic war continues. President Putin has signed a decree to take control of foreign-owned assets in Russia.
Yeah, that's Finland's Fortum and Germany's Uniper, which had energy infrastructure in Russia before the so-called special military operation last year, which now the Kremlin says will be managed by Russia. So the Kremlin is making clear that this is in response to what it calls a response to aggressive actions of unfriendly countries. Dmitry Peskov, the Kremlin press secretary, says that these companies still retain their assets, they still own them, but they will now be managed by presidential decree by Russia, and that is until there can be progress made on sanctions on the West, which the Kremlin says these are in response to. Now, Finland has commented, saying the situation is worrying. All of the nations involved, Germany and Finland, as well as the companies, say they are awaiting more detail. This relates to around $1.8 billion worth of infrastructure in Russia, and the reason these companies haven't already left, although they have said they have been trying to, is because it now is very difficult, especially for energy companies, to sell their assets in Russia. They're liable to pay huge taxes, and also they have to get the sale approved by sometimes the president himself. So it is difficult for these companies to leave, and clearly now they've been bitten by this response.
Stuart, several Russian planes have been intercepted. What more can you tell us? What more are you able to tell us about that?
Yeah, over the Baltic Sea, so close to, over the sea that connects the mainland of Russia to Kaliningrad, which means these kinds of flights are not so rare in themselves. They were detected by German and British pilots, which are there as part of a NATO monitoring group, because the Baltic nations, Estonia, Lithuania and Latvia, don't have their own fighter aircraft. So this was Germany saying that it is aware there is a Russian aircraft presence over the Baltic Sea and that their transponders were turned off, but no suggestion of any greater threat than just that.
Stuart, thank you for that. Our correspondent Stuart Smith in Moscow. You're watching CGTN. Still ahead, home sweet home, unless you're a foreigner. Why Texas is banning some foreign nationals from owning property.
Ever wondered what's the difference between a bear and a bull market? Where are the cash cows? And who are the lame ducks? And what exactly are black swans? Grey rhinos? And unicorn companies? Make sense of it all with Global Business, only on CGTN.
There's a new agenda for a new world, accelerating change in almost every part of our lives. It's shifting the norms of how we work, travel, and connect. How we think, interact, and develop. It's a new reality, a new agenda with me, Juliet Mann.
Hello, welcome back. A reminder of our top stories. China's President Xi Jinping and Ukraine's President Zelensky have had their first phone call since the Russia-Ukraine conflict began. Zelensky described it as long and meaningful. Our other headlines: thousands of people are airlifted from Sudan, where an uneasy ceasefire seems to be holding. Israelis are celebrating the country's 75th anniversary. Political tensions, though, are casting a long shadow over the celebrations this year. CGTN's correspondent Stephanie Freed reports.
During the 24 hours leading up to Independence Day, Israelis observe Memorial Day. It's a time of silent contemplation, of families visiting graves of their lost ones, and of formal ceremonies honoring the fallen. This year, as political unrest, the threat of judicial upheaval, and months-long countrywide protests rock the country, Israel's president appealed for calm in his Memorial Day address.
This year, in the grips of these days of discord, the sound of the siren is more powerful, more searing, more pained, and more painful than ever. This year, more than ever before, this sound calls on us in the heart of the stillness that cries out, all of us together.
But the president's appeal fell on the deaf ears of mourners angered by government minister appearances at local ceremonies. Despite family requests, they stay away. The sanctity of Memorial Day ritual was marred this year by the high emotion of a country in crisis. Hours later, Israel ushered in Independence Day.
Celebrations are also breaking with tradition. This is an alternative gathering. The official one is happening in Jerusalem. This is also the spot where hundreds of thousands of Israelis have been coming over the past 4 months on a weekly basis to protest against the government.
The protests are against government plans to overhaul Israel's legal system. The overhaul will undo judicial checks and balances. On Independence Day, there will be parties and barbecues and an Air Force flyover, but more protests are planned for the coming days. Some may turn violent. Stephanie Fried, CGTN, Tel Aviv.
The Taliban has killed the Islamic State leader who spearheaded the 2021 suicide bombing at Kabul airport. The Pentagon has confirmed the death of the unnamed figure, saying he was killed during a battle this month in Afghanistan. The Kabul airport bombing took place in 2021 during the chaotic U.S. withdrawal from Afghanistan, leaving 170 Afghans and 13 U.S. personnel dead. Singapore has executed a man for smuggling cannabis in 2013. The sentence has drawn criticism from the United Nations Human Rights Office and the British entrepreneur Richard Branson. Branson says the verdict shouldn't stand because the drugs were not found near the man when he was arrested. Singapore has the world's strictest laws on drug trafficking, which carry the death penalty. A Florida Uber Eats driver was murdered and dismembered after making a food delivery. Oscar Solis Jr. is accused of killing the driver at his home in Florida and disposing of the remains in bin bags and a cooler. Should foreigners be stopped from owning property in the United States? There are more than a dozen bills being debated in state legislatures across the United States that would restrict ownership. Many of the proposals focus on those from China. Proponents say new laws are needed to protect national security, pointing to several large land purchases near military bases. But some members of the Chinese community say the bills are xenophobic and could inflame anti-Asian sentiment. Our correspondent Tony Waterman reports.
My husband always loved the birds.
For years, Alice E. kept birds on her sprawling property in Austin, Texas. 2 peacocks and a golden pheasant. They reminded her, she says, of her childhood in China.
When you hatch them, when they see you first, they feel like you're the mother.
Alice moved to Texas 43 years ago to attend college and liked it so much she never left. She's now a U.S. citizen. But the once welcoming atmosphere, she says, shifted during the pandemic and has worsened amid a slew of proposed legislation targeting China on everything from land purchases to social media, even college admissions.
Now I feel like we all not look like American or not look like white, so we're foreigners forever.
One bill being debated would have banned Chinese, Iranian, North Korean, and Russian nationals, even those legally residing in Texas, from purchasing land. After pushback, the language was tempered. Gone are specific countries, replaced by anyone or any entity from a country deemed a threat by the U.S. government. Dual nationals and legal residents are exempt.
Senate Bill 147 provides common sense guardrails.
Lawmakers say bills like this are necessary to protect national security. pointing to a Chinese national who bought about 53,000 hectares near the Laughlin Air Force Base in Texas. He said it was to build a wind farm, but it got lawmakers nervous.
The citizens of the state of Texas understand the threat of which we are under. I bring this bill before you as a liberty lover and someone that wants to protect our food security, our mineral security, and the future of our great state.
And as goes Texas, so goes the United States.
At least 11 states are now debating legislation that would restrict foreign ownership of farmland or real estate. And just last month, Arkansas Senator Tom Cotton introduced federal legislation that would prevent any Chinese individual or business from owning land in America.
But singling out one nationality has raised questions about whether such laws are even constitutional.
It is not, right? Let's just start with there.
Leo Yu is a law professor at Southern Methodist University. He says, as drafted, most of the bills would directly violate the 14th Amendment, which protects property rights and equal protection under the law.
National security concern is definitely a legitimate concern these days, and I'm not saying that it is not. But I think what happened now is that we really have broadened the definition of national security to a level that we don't really know what that means anymore.
1998 and Bill Clinton.
Alice E. also thinks national security concerns are being exploited.
As a legal residents in the United States, we should be protected by United States law, no matter what. But I feel like right now, just using national security take away all our rights.
And is replaced, she says, by old-fashioned discrimination. Tony Waterman, CGTN, Austin, Texas.
A powerful winter storm has swept the west coast of the United States. Days of heavy rain has triggered a massive sewage spill into the Los Angeles River. Our correspondent Adis Tianshan reports.
For almost a week, a series of beaches stretching nearly 11 kilometers have been temporarily closed to the public for safety reasons. After nearly 250,000 gallons of sewage that is just short of 1 million liters was spilled into the Los Angeles River due to an equipment malfunction during maintenance work by sanitation crews last Thursday, leaving the coastal community and its visitors feeling frustrated.
I think what would improve it would be if they came up with some sort of solution to really prevent that runoff coming in. Pretty simple. Find a solution to stop it from happening. You won't have this happening that often, and you'll bring back a lot more public safety and public trust.
The city of Long Beach is a coastal community whose economy relies on visitors year-round. Sean owns a beachfront property he regularly rents out to visitors and says spills like this have a big impact on this business.
It's just, forget the finances, but it obviously impacts me quite a bit because it'll leave a bad taste in people's mouth or a bad smell, if you want to call it a bad smell, and they can't enjoy the beach is why they come and visit to have the view as well as enjoy the facilities and enjoy it. So it's very disappointing.
The spill ironically coincided just ahead of Earth Day, the annual global day set aside to promote environmental protection. And unfortunately, the area is not new to these kinds of environmental accidents. This spill is the second to affect Long Beach in less than 2 months and the fourth in LA County in just 8 months. It's not clear how long this latest closure will last, but many in the community are starting to wonder if enough is being done to prevent these kinds of accidents and protect the environment. It is Tianshan, CGTN, Long Beach, California.
Japan's space startup company iSpace has confirmed its mission to make the world's first commercial landing on the moon has failed. The lander lost communication with the control room during the last phase of landing. iSpace said the lander likely made what it called a hard landing on the moon's surface. The Hakuto spaceship was sent into space by SpaceX's Falcon rocket last December. It carried the UAE's first moon rover and a Japanese robot to collect data and samples from the lunar surface. Norway has expressed displeasure with Sweden after a research rocket crossed its border and crashed into a mountain. No injuries or damage were reported, but Oslo said it should have been informed of the incident immediately. The rocket was launched from a space center in Sweden. Yaya, a giant panda, is returning to China after living in Memphis Zoo for 20 years. In February, Chinese veterinary surgeons visited Memphis to check on Yaya's health. They said a skin disease had caused her to lose fur, but otherwise she had a good appetite and stable weight. They added that the panda's health and body weight are both stable. Many in Memphis say they'll be sorry to see her go.
And it's so heartbreaking. We grew up with her.
Are you from?
I'm from here. I'm from South Haven. I came when they brought them.
20 years ago?
20 years ago, I was here to greet them. A great experience. We got to know them. We got to enjoy them. We got to learn about them and everything. And that's the best thing we could have done.
I have been here with her about 30 to 40 days already. I'm very sad because she will leave soon, but I'm also very excited because she can finally return home to her motherland.
The headlines again. Ukrainian President Zelensky describes Wednesday's phone call with China's President Xi Jinping as long and meaningful and has appointed a new ambassador to Beijing. Our other headlines: thousands of people are evacuated from Sudan, where an uneasy ceasefire seems to be holding. And Texas is banning some foreign nationals, including the Chinese, from owning land, citing national security reasons. And that is the world today. Thank you for watching. There's more news on CGTN Europe's channel, on the Telegram app, or scan the QR code on the screen to get stories and updates sent direct to your phone. We're back with more news at the top of this hour. Coming up next, it's World Insight. For now, from all of the team in London, it's goodbye.
Hi there and welcome to weather forecast over to Europe. Wednesday, we're going to have a wide range of light to moderate rainfall stretching from much of the Balkans all the way up to Ukraine and Belarus, as well as much of western Russia. Over to northern Europe, you can see snowfall. Also, a chance of sleet to be had along the Alps. We'll look into Thursday, very similar picture to be had up to northern Europe. As low trough continues to push eastward, the raining belt will also shift to the east. And back to western portion, you can see a chance of light rainfall picking up in western France. Speaking of temperature fluctuation, daily highs may drop by 4 to 8 degrees in much of central and parts of eastern Europe on Wednesday and also Thursday because of rainfall. Back to western portion, low rain chances will help temperature warm up. And our business and travel outlook, we're going to have 11 to 3 in Copenhagen, light rainfall. Very similar feelings outside for folks in Stockholm on Thursday. A bit warmer day, highs in Helsinki be around 14. Partly sunny sky in Minsk and light rainfall. Day highs be around 10 for folks in Kiev. Over to Moscow, day highs be around 23. The minimum temperatures be around 9 degrees Celsius. A chance of light rainfall. Well, that's it for now. Stay tuned for more city forecast.
This is CGTN.